Hello, everybody. This is Kurt Heiden, chair of the IASIG, and welcome to our first all virtual town hall meeting. Welcome. I want to thank our hosts, IGDA and Renee Gittins, for putting this together for us online. And we've got a lot of stuff to cover, so I'm going to get straight into it here. If you haven't heard of the IASIG, we are the Interactive Audio Special Interest Group. We're going to cover a little bit about a new partnership with IGDA, which you may have heard about. Mike Kent's here from the MIDI Association to talk about MIDI 2.0, and Steve Horowitz is here to talk about our audio education working group and what's going on there. And then we want to hear from you, so stick around. It's very important that we get your feedback and what you want to see improved in the industry. So for those who don't know the IASIG, we were formed at GDC in 1994. At that time, there were no audio tracks whatsoever at the show. So a bunch of audio folks got together and said, we need to fix this. And several things ensued. After that, we formed in that year. And gosh, for 26 years now, the SIG's been bringing people together with a goal to improve tools and resources for game audio professionals and educators. So we also publish collaborative efforts that have companies like Microsoft, Creative Labs. Gosh, over the years, there's been so many, Dolby, FMod, Audio Kinetic, that have helped contribute to documents that we've published and that are we call worthy of the industry. So we have a process for putting down professional documents and publishing them. And we also host 2 events at GDC every year. And obviously this year we couldn't do that because it's being done online, and we're going to do this online today. So those 2 events are our town hall meeting, which you're at right now, and the other is an annual mixer where audio folks can get together and share stories, meet some new people who are coming up through the ranks. And one of the things I should mention here is people often ask, what's the difference between the IASIG and GANG? They're both audio organizations in gaming. That is true. But what you see here really is the charter of the IASIG, and that is to publish professional collaborative content and bring people together to improve tools and resources. And GANG's mission is a little different, both important organizations. We love the folks at GANG, and we're very happy to have them participate in a lot of our activities and vice versa. So our history, we've published quite a few things. Most recently, the Game Audio Education Curriculum Guidelines, which help educators to prepare students for careers in game audio. And before that, we published all kinds of specifications and documents that basically help the industry to improve in one way or another. And in some ways, the industry moves beyond a specification after a while, but there's always room for more. So if you've got ideas, we'd love to hear them. And we couldn't do any of this without our sponsors. I have to thank them: Audio Kinetic, FMod, Dolby, and our new sponsor this year, East West, Protos Audio. They've all been terrific sponsors for our events at GDC, and we're very grateful for their support. GANG has also supported us quite a bit. Isotope, if you've ever attended our annual mixer, you probably won a prize from them if you were lucky enough to win the raffle. And Game Sound Con, of course, you probably have all heard of that as well. The big news, though, really, is we have been partnered with the MIDI Association since our inception. So the DLS publication, for example, started in the IASIG and moved over to the MIDI Association. So they do some great publications as well. You've all used MIDI before, and gosh, 26 years with them has been great. And we now have a new partner in the IGDA. The IGDA has done so much for the industry. It's hard to even put it all into words, but we've got somebody here, Executive Director Renee Gittins, to tell us about that. And that partnership is something we're very excited about, and we're looking forward to. What that means for everybody really is individual membership dues are free for IGDA members. So if you are an IGDA member, you can join the IASIG for free just by going to the link shown here on the screen in the top bullet. New audio SIG area has been created at the IGDA website under SIGs, under audio. And if you're a current IASIG member, you get discounted IGDA membership through June of 2020. So we're strongly encouraging, if you're an IASIG member now, to join the IGDA as soon as you can, and you'll get your IASIG membership in there for free as well. We have leadership positions available in the IASIG right now. If you've got a skill, volunteer. We are an all-volunteer organization. We're nonprofit, and we basically we give back to the industry. That's one of the important things to remember about the organization. And we are only at our best when you take the time and help us by volunteering. So if you've got an idea, again, bring it up at the end of this presentation, or on our many different ways that you can reach us at the IGDA SIG section, or on our site at iasig.org. And with that, I am going to hand over to Renee, who's going to tell you a bit about the IGDA.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the warm introduction. And I'd like to say that I'm very excited to have the Interactive Audio Special Interest Group join us. As everyone knows, audio is extremely important to immersive experiences and interactive mediums. Audio helps convey emotion that cannot often be captured in other types of mediums when you're looking at video games. So we're really happy to have them on board. I'd like to present a little bit of information about the IGDA for the people from the Interactive Audio SIG who might not be familiar with what we do for game developers. So this will be a short presentation going over what the IGDA does, our history, our benefits, and all of the initiatives we do to help game developers around the world. So the IGDA is the International Game Developers Association. We are a nonprofit group, the largest in the world, that represents individuals who create games. Technically, we're a 501c6 nonprofit professional association, but what we do is support game developers no matter what field you're in or where you are in the world. Our mission statement is to support and empower game developers around the world in achieving fulfilling and sustainable careers. And all of the goals that we have, all of the initiatives that we have are targeted at fulfilling this mission. So our specific goals are based on supporting diverse and inclusive communities, encouraging and hosting discussions and programs that enrich game developers' skills and lives, and to connect game developers around the world. Basically, I break this down into three things. We support knowledge, we support community, and we are an advocate. We advocate for the best that for the game developers themselves. So how is the IGDA formed? Well, we were formed back in 1994 ourselves because there was a issue in Congress where Mortal Kombat was being seen as overly violent for children, though it was not necessarily marketed at children. And there was a lot of discussion, between the large companies about what it meant to be a video game and who was at fault. But during all of those discussions, no one came forward to represent the individual developers and to make sure their voice was heard. So that's why the IGDA was formed. It's not a trade organization. We're not here to support game development companies. We're not advocating for, large companies. We're advocating for individual developers. So yes, we support their companies, but we really focus our support on individuals' careers and lives. So the work that we do has resulted in many effects. We've presented a lot of evidence and information about how anti-crunch or how crunch doesn't work. And we've recently launched our own game industry standards, which we are working on enforcing and reporting to help prevent abuse by management, to ensure event diversity, to ensure proper crediting, which of course is very important if you're doing audio for games, and many, many more things. We also do a lot to support diversity within the game industry. We have special interest groups that are focused on diversity backgrounds as well. So we have LGBTQ+, women in games, blacks in games, etc. We work to help combat censorship and to ensure that people understand that video games don't cause things like gun violence. And then we support game developers with both business advice support, and we support students by supporting them in their schools and the schools themselves. We also have created numerous benefits and programs. One of the most wide-known efforts that we do is the Developer Satisfaction Survey, which is a bi-yearly survey that helps understand the state of the industry, the state of the developers within it, things like current diversity, but as well as, what work-life balance is like, how companies are implementing best practices, what's going to be the next up-and-coming thing within the game development industry. We work with the IGDA Foundation to provide dozens of scholarships to GDC, which of course, unfortunately, didn't happen this year. We run our own leadership summit, and we have a resource library that is full of white papers, surveys, and all sorts of information that helps you not only improve your current skills, but gain new skills and ensure that you can pursue your career or your business with the best possible information. We have also just launched a global mentorship program. This program is open to IGDA members of any level of experience. So even if you're a senior programmer or a junior producer, you can apply to this program and be paired with a mentor that's going to help you on your career path. And finally, 2 weeks ago, we had our own Game Development Crisis Conference that had 7 talks that were all about supporting game developers through this time of crisis, from mental health and self-care to managing remote teams to technical difficulties. And I know that many people who work in audio are struggling when it comes to the technical solutions of having to VPN in to machines when you're suddenly working remotely. So as for the developer satisfaction survey, we had some really interesting results from this last year. We noticed that the number of females within the game industry has risen from around 21% to 24%, and that there are more non-males in the industry as well. We also noticed that the average age of game developers is getting older, which is actually a really good sign. It shows that our industry is becoming more stable and people are able to stay in it longer. Also with stability, we've seen a rise in developers who have kids. We've seen that 35% of game developers have children. And that really shows that people are feeling confident in starting families and maintaining families while within the game industry. And finally, we did see that the game industry is still expectant to be somewhat tumultuous, that most people aren't expecting to remain with their current employer for more than 3 years. So the IGDA is supported by many, many partners, from Amazon and Bungie to smaller studios like Mohawk Games and Play Everywhere. And we really appreciate the support that we receive from all of them. And when it comes to the communities that also support us and that we manage, we have special interest groups. Now, obviously, the Interactive Audio Special Interest Group is our latest special interest group, and we're really looking forward to helping their community with all of our resources and tools. We also have multiple groups, as I mentioned, that do affinity and advocacy, such as Jewish game devs and our allies SIG. But we also have many other discipline SIGs, from quality assurance to game design to game research and user experience. So how it works is the headquarters, which I represent, ensures the best interests of game developers. We help organize large events such as GDCs, such as this Game Development Crisis Conference, such as our Leadership Summit, and we provide a single location for information. We also have local chapters, and those local chapters help developers in those communities network locally, connect with developers who can relate to them, and really build a community of support. We currently have over 111 chapters around the world, with many in the US, but many in other locations. We have chapters everywhere from Finland to Argentina to Japan. These chapters run events that span over a wide range of things. There are, of course, casual meetups where people are just getting together over some pizza or a beer, but there's also job fairs, postmortems, and even game jams. And these groups have helped many developers succeed. Here's some successes that we've seen last year. IGDA Chicago helped showcase a large selection of local games, indie games, at the largest arcade festival, BitBash. IGDA Finland hosts over 150 events every year. IGDA Melania was able to elevate their community and won multiple awards at a global level. And IGDA Iran had a 3-woman team won Casual Connect's grand prize. So there are many benefits from joining the IGDA. One of our individuals had his whole career empowered by the IGDA itself. He met one of his first contacts at an IGDA meeting and ended up volunteering and got his first job through his volunteering work for the IGDA. And then when he joined the board, he was able to find an investor who funded his startup. And here he said, if you want to know why so many people are passionate about the IGDA, it's because they have the organization to thank for the career they love. So, thank you for your support.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Renee.
Yeah. Next, we're going to have Mike Kent talking about MIDI 2.0. And I know that I'm really interested to see and hear about how MIDI is growing with these times.
Thanks, Renee. My name is Mike Kent. I'm an independent consultant. I work for Yamaha, Apple, Roland, and other companies, and probably met a number of you in that role in Roland, or as a representative of the MIDI Manufacturers Association for the last 26 years. Working independently now, I've been working over the last few years on MIDI 2, and I am the MIDI 2.0 Working Group Chairman of the MIDI Manufacturers Association. The MMA has partner associations, including this one here that we're all joined together on the ASIG, and also the MIDI Association. The MIDI Manufacturers Association is for developing MIDI specifications, and then the MIDI Association is a larger community, and we would invite you to join the MIDI Association. So let's take a look at MIDI 2.0, what we've been working on for the last few years and has just been published. And so let's jump in. I'm going to be going through this, I think, pretty quickly. So MIDI 2.0 starts with something called MIDI Capability Inquiry. And MIDI 2.0 really requires a bidirectional connection and takes advantage of a bidirectional connection. And two devices talk to each other using MIDI CI, MIDI Capability Inquiry, using system exclusive messages, and they agree on features that they want to use if they're going to use these new MIDI 2.0 features. There are the 3 Ps of MIDI 2.0 that are enabled by MIDI CI: profile configuration, property exchange, and protocol negotiation. Quickly on each of these, profile configuration allows devices of similar types to share a common set of messages or controls that they're going to use. So in this example here, you see several types of drawbar organ, and one's a virtual software, one's the classic B3, and the other one's a more modern keyboard with drawbars on it. And before profiles, each one of these might use different controllers for each of those drawbars. But under a profile, they all agreed to use the same controller for drawbar number 16, the same controller for drawbar number 8, and so on. And so profiles build greater interoperability between devices and interoperability of data. So I create a MIDI track for one drawbar organ, it'll play it back on another one and use the same settings properly on other devices. So simple auto configuration is the main goal of this profile configuration. And we are currently developing profiles for very common types like pianos and drawbar organs, as I showed, guitars, drum sets. We might even be able to develop a profile for a game controller to send MIDI data and come up with a common set of MIDI controls for game controllers. That's profiles. Property exchange is a method for two devices to exchange by a get and set mechanisms, and they generally use JSON text inside of a sysx. Let's just take a quick look at that. Here's an example transaction. An initiator does a get for a resource that's called device info, just as a simple example. And the reply comes back from the responder and it says, first of all, there's a status of 200. Yes, I got that and it's all okay. And then there's the actual data that is part of that resource. And so you see this is just standard JSON exchange of information. And this can be used to get all kinds of common data, like what MIDI channel are you on, or even custom data. A device can use very specific commands through JSON here and exchange very customized data. The third P is protocol negotiation, where the two devices can agree to use the MIDI 1.0 messages that we're used to, or switch to the new higher resolution and extended MIDI 2.0 protocol. In order to enable this new protocol, we've had to define a new data format for MIDI. We call the universal MIDI packet. So here's some examples of messages. All messages in the UMP are 32-bit, 64-bit, 96, or 128 bits wide. And so nice round words. System messages take up 32-bit messages, packets. Utility messages include things like timestamps. Those are 32-bit. And then channel voice messages, that's things like node on and controllers and program change, are in a 64-bit packet. The first nibble here in these messages, or the first 4 bits, is what we call message type. And so there are 16 different message types, and we've used 5 of them to define all of the things that MIDI 1.0 ever did, and all of the things that MIDI 2.0 is defined to do today. So there's a lot of reserve space, and in fact, we could add thousands of messages down the road if we need it. So there's a lot more room than what we had in MIDI 1.0 for future expansion. These messages continue to use the concept of channels, just like MIDI has, and there are the 16 channels still are there, just like MIDI 1.0, but now we've got 4 bits for groups, so that is 16 groups of 16 channels for a total of 256 channels that are available on one UMP connection. Each one of these groups is roughly equivalent to a MIDI 1.0 cable, in that there are 16 channels instead of system messages. And indeed, when it comes to translation, you can take a single UMP stream and translate it back to 16 MIDI 1.0 streams. Backward compatibility was hugely important as we came up with the design for this MIDI 2.0. Let's just take a quick look at a couple of messages. Node on here. So here's a MIDI 1.0 node on the top placed into this universal MIDI packet. So you'll see at the beginning of this message is that message type, and then the group. And then the rest of the message, the other 3 bytes that are there, are identical to that message when it's in the old MIDI 1.0 byte stream. But now we put MIDI into a nice 32-bit packet, which is a much more modern format for throwing around in modern systems. A MIDI 2.0 node on then takes the same format or same architectural and same semantics, but expands on them. So we have the message type has changed to show that it's not a MIDI 1.0, but MIDI 2.0. We have groups and channels. We still have note numbers, and velocity is moved into the second 32 bits, which is really our data area, and is now a 16-bit value instead of a 7-bit value. And we have 2 new fields in here. One is the attribute type field. The other one is 16 bits of attribute data. This allows us to put extended information into the node on. And we have a number of uses for that. For example, we can put in precise pitch or very specific articulation message or data. So, in fact, we are going to be defining this year orchestral articulation. And so, when you set that attribute type to number 10, that will be a signal that that attribute data is this orchestral articulation. And we've got quite a ways down the road of defining a first proposal for that. So, I would look forward to seeing that later this year. I think this is really going to change the way orchestral scoring is done. It's going to be a great boost um, to allow cross compatibility between sound libraries and different engines. Just taking a quick look at controllers, those of you who use MIDI 1.0 are familiar with the fact that MIDI has 128 steps. Well, in fact, you can use multiple messages to get higher resolution, but it gets quite complex. The native data format is 7-bit data. And the native bit data format for MIDI 2.0 is 32-bit. So all controllers go from having 128 steps to having 4 billion steps. So you don't need to use all 4 billion of them, but they're there and available when you really need high resolution. I should also mention, while we're just talking about controller messages, there are 128 control change messages, and then we have things called NRPN and RPM, which are really not friendly to use. But in MIDI 2.0, we have new assignable and registered controllers. So there's another 32,000 controllers available to us now that are simple to use, as simple as control change messages. So really expanding our universe and moving outside these limitations and boundaries. We've also added per note controllers. So this is 32 bits of data that you can add to a note. And actually, there are up to 512 of these. So you can add 512 properties to a note through the use of these per note controllers. And that could be something that you just have assigned to the note and the note plays with that property, or it's something that you could actually control with a controller so that it changes and lives and breathes throughout the life of a note. So this per note assignable controller and also per note pitch bend is going to give a lot more expressive capabilities to MIDI 2.0. So there's a lot of new musical expression available to those of you who are composing music for games and using MIDI. The ease of use that's going to come through auto configuration. Property Exchange is going to use JSON to do a lot of auto configuration. So you won't have to go in necessarily and do auto mapping. Your DAW can ask a device or a plugin, what do you have and what MIDI controllers do you want to receive? And auto configuration can happen. So for musicians, we were looking for backwards compatibility was huge, increased musical expression, and auto configuration and improved workflows. As we move into expanding beyond that, we came up with the idea of this mixed data set. The mixed data set is a large message that can carry huge amounts of data. So if you want to send custom your proprietary data, if you wanted to send audio over your MIDI stream, you could fit it into here. I'm not saying that that's the best way to send audio, but you could. You could send any data through this mixed data set message. We've also increased accuracy of timing through the use of timestamps. And so here are a couple of MIDI messages with timestamps on them. You could timestamp every MIDI message. So your timing clock, system clock, and your start and stop, all of that's more accurate. The timing of your notes are accurate. You could play multiple notes and have them render all on exactly the same time by putting them all on the same timestamp, something that you couldn't do with serial MIDI. And so these timestamps, some people are going to really love. So those are features that I think all work well for those of us like me that are musicians and composing music. But I also want to just quickly cover why is MIDI 2.0 better for interactive applications. And just a few ideas here: bidirectional and discovery. So now, if you wanted to have a game that was interacting with MIDI, it can find components or musical components or MIDI capable devices or components in software and use standard MIDI ways to discover those things. You have device profiles, and so we can define profiles for As I said, even game controllers, we can define profiles now so that game controllers can use MIDI in a very standard way. Property exchange allows you to exchange JSON, and there's a lot of programmers who are very familiar with JSON, and it's a great way to throw away, throw around, simple scripts or any other custom data that you wanted to send. Um, we have 16 groups, so that could be 256 channels. But those can also be used for routing of data. So if you need to send MIDI data to different locations, you can use one group per kind of sub module and send data in different directions. And each one of those groups has its own set of 16 channels and system messages and timing clock. And property exchange and profiles and so on are all independent per group. We have per note control, which is great if you're going to use MIDI as a way to trigger notes and other audio things, audio clips or loops. Per note control would allow you then to have very fine control over everything that you're doing. Whereas MIDI 1.0, we only had that on a channel basis. We now have that on a per note basis. Timestamps will be a tremendous help to a lot of applications. And finally, this mixed data set. To send your custom data along with your MIDI data, whatever that might look like. So when is this all going to happen? MIDI 2.0 is a reality now in terms of specification, but not necessarily in ability for musicians to use it. The specs were just published in February, and leading manufacturers have been building programs on this for about a year and a half now. So we'll see the first products come out this year. But fundamentally, we need some underlying architecture. So we need the major operating system companies where your applications run. We need them to support this new MIDI API that supports the universal MIDI packet. And fortunately, Microsoft, Google, and Apple have all participated in this effort and are very aware of MIDI 2.0 and have been developing plans on what they're going to do. I can't tell you what they could do, what they're going to do, but those companies never tell you what they're going to do until they do it. So we wait and are excited to see what they bring to us. We need transports to connect hardware devices. There is a new USB MIDI 2.0 specification that is about to be released from the USB Implementers Forum. It's finished now, just going through final approval stages. There are other transports for MIDI. And eventually we'll get MIDI 2.0 on all the existing ones that are there. But certainly these days, network is an important one. And when MIDI came out 37 years ago, we did not have the internet of devices. And networking was a long way off on people's minds, but today it's important. And so we have some ideas about where MIDI 2.0 will be put on networks. We need support from DAWs and major music applications and hardware devices. And as I said, a lot of the major manufacturers like the OS companies have been participating in writing these specs with us. And so we expect to see those companies begin to support. Probably towards the end of this year, I would think, would start to see wider support of all of these things come together. And we'd love to see all the middleware companies adopting MIDI 2.0 in the universal MIDI packet. I think it's natural, and I think we'll expect that they will do so. I know that some of them are aware of what we've been doing. I'm not sure that they are. I don't know about all of them. I haven't talked to all of them, but I feel optimistic that towards the end of this year, MIDI 2 will begin to be a reality. It's going to take some years to roll out throughout your whole system, but fortunately, compatibility to MIDI 1.0 is high, so you can continue to use all your MIDI 1.0 tools and start to integrate MIDI 2.0 tools into the system that you have already. So to close, what should you do? You should join the MIDI Association. Go to our website. It's free to join. If you'd like to join the MIDI Manufacturers Association because you intend to build MIDI devices or MIDI applications and want to participate in defining specifications, defining profiles that are important for your industry or something like that, then you join the MIDI Manufacturers Association, which you can also do there. And if there's any information that you need from either the MIDI Manufacturers Association or the MIDI Association, email us at info@midi.org. We're happy to answer your questions. Thanks for your time. I'm going to hand this off to Steve Horowitz now, and I look forward to what Steve's about to tell us.
Thanks, Mike. Kurt, do you want to talk a little bit while I'm getting my presentation up?
Well, okay, sure. That was a very exciting presentation. Thank you, Mike, for that. A lot of comments. People had questions about it. That's really good news. I would love to see some of the tool manufacturers, Audio Kinetic, Fmod. I'd love to see those guys start integrating some of these capabilities to be on the train when it gets out the gate.
Yep.
How you doing, Steve?
I'm doing good. I just wanted to say that, I'm waiting for the screen to come up, but I'm just really thrilled. I'm super excited that we're doing this with the IGDA. So a huge thanks to Renee and also to, Mike and the whole group at the MMA. I think this is a super exciting time for the IASIG and a chance for us to really kind of like move into the future. And I can't think of a better way to do it. Anyway, Game Audio Education Working Group, which was started in 2007, if everybody here can believe that. And we've had a great group of people who have worked on this over the years. That's national and international as well. And you can go to the IASIG website and check it out and see, some of the people who have chaired the groups. We've had people from England, from Turkey, from all over the world, from the United States, of course, who have been involved in sort of creating and developing educational resources. And I'm super excited. One of the things I'm really excited about in partnering with the IGDA is our ability now to work with the IGDA Education Working Group as well, the game design and game education group, so we can start to maybe put some resources together, working in tandem, so that we can create some new and exciting things. So just to go back a little bit over the past, we did start in 2007. And the IGDA, the Game Audio Education Working Group really started because at GDC and other trade shows, people were coming up to us and they were like, how do I get started in game audio? What do I need to know? What are the things that I should be looking at? So a bunch of us got together. That included Michael Sweet from the Berklee School of Music, David Havalosa from Santa Monica College, and we started to develop a series of guidelines. And those are the game audio resources for educators and students that we put together. So the game audio curriculum guidelines were put together just to sort of give a roadmap so we didn't have to constantly be reinventing the wheel every time. And to also give educational institutions and schools, and actually we're finding now also in high schools and middle schools, a place that they can go in order to understand what needs to be taught, what things are important, how interactive audio and interactive applications differ from just doing linear media. After we created those guidelines, the next step was to create an adaptive audio wiki, which was spearheaded by Michael Sweet from the Berklee School of Music. We also make sure that we maintain our presence at trade shows, just like Renee was saying, at GDC, AES, and other shows, where we get together and able to have face-to-face time, usually, not this time, of course, at our town hall meetings, and to sit and discuss important things. I was a chair of the Education Working Group for a while. Owen Peterson from Utah Valley University is the current chair of the Education Working Group. I've put his email up here for everybody, and I encourage you guys to please get in touch with him with ideas, with questions. I can answer some of those today, how you can get involved and be more active with this group. What Owen is currently working on and what the group is working on as a whole is a new educational resources website that's still in progress. And we're super excited that that's coming, and it's filled with all sorts of interesting stuff. At the town hall meeting last year, he gave us a little walkthrough of how that was looking, and some of his students were developing that with him. So like it says here on the slide, we're always looking for new members, help support new ideas and new ways of collaborating between IGDA and the IASIG working group. and different ideas and different thoughts of what's happening in education and what should be happening more in game audio education. A couple of things that have been on my mind recently, and then I'm going to pass it off to the QA, maybe this will help to get some conversation started, are connections between game design schools and game audio programs at schools. So I teach at San Francisco State University currently, and we do a collab with the Games and Playable Media Department at UC Santa Cruz, as well as with the game design class at San Francisco State. I would love to see more of that kind of collaboration go on between schools all over the country and the world, so that audio students would have a chance and teachers would have a chance to bring their students together to collaborate. So that's one thing that's definitely been on my mind. The other thing is very, very current, which is teachers are really freaking out right now and scrambling to develop solutions for online interactive education. And I think that this group could potentially come up with some interesting solutions and interesting suggestions for how that could happen quickly, because I think it's something that does need to happen quickly. So those are just some of the things that are on my mind. Owen has fantastic ideas for how he's leading this group. And it's just, again, to give you guys a little taste of what happens within these working groups, and how you can get involved and help to change the industry. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass it back over to the group for a Q&A, I suppose, for the rest of the time.
That is where we're at. And you can download, by the way, you can download all the publications that have been talked about, at least by Steve anyway, from the IASIG.org website. And, you know, with this new partnership with IGDA, the IASIG has a larger digital footprint than ever. You can connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and through the IGDA on Facebook and the IGDA website. So enough about us. Let's talk about you. What do you think of us? No, we want to hear from you. We want to know what you think, and really, this organization thrives on new ideas and on solving problems that that you want to see solved. And ideally, there are opportunities for you to step up and lead in this circumstance and actually run your own working group. Pick up one of the projects that's been started but is incomplete in our current set of projects, or start a new one. But it's all about you. So with that, if there are any questions, we are happy to take them.
Are we fielding questions through the chat?
I think we're fielding questions through the chat. I don't think there's any way for people to ask a video question, unless there is, and I just didn't. I didn't prep for that.
Well, I can ask a video question. So, for the general IGDA members who are looking to join the interactive audio special interest group, what are the main resources and benefits they get from signing up and getting an official membership?
Well, they for starters, they get to have full access to works in progress. So we've got things like the IXMF specification that's about 80% completed. That's been sitting there. Sony's worked on it. A bunch of people we know who, over the years, have worked on it. But we haven't been able to get that out the door because we need somebody who's a good coder and who has a passion for that and wants to help make it a reality to finish that specification up. They also, of course, would be able to be a part of our working groups and lead other people in publishing new specifications or free resources for the industry. And we have really simple guidelines to see those kinds of processes through in a professional manner. But we're itching for new people with new ideas to do those things, and we welcome them wholeheartedly.
Yeah, it also gives, if I can add on to what Kurt's saying, it also gives people a chance to go to GDC and to present their work, to meet the audio industry in a different way. I like to talk about enlightened self-interest. By joining the SIG, by joining the community, by joining IGDA, you have you are basically helping your career out at the same time that you're also helping out the audio community and helping to advance the art and science of sound and music for games. And that's super important. I mean, you'll get a chance to work on stuff like MIDI 2.0 or to interface with companies. And that's what the SIG really provides you, is a voice to interface between companies such as the MIDI Manufacturers Association that's looking for people to actively help and to develop these things, and the designers in the field who are the ones who really know how the stuff should work and how will benefit our lives every day. So it's a match made in heaven.
So speaking of MIDI, we actually have a question from the chat. Someone asks, how will the adoption of MIDI 2.0 affect a studio setup with software and hardware gear centered entirely around MIDI 1.0?
Well, to start with, we needed a new underlying architecture, and this is what I talked about at the end of my presentation, where we need a new MIDI API from each of the OS companies. And that MIDI API then will continue to support MIDI 1.0, but also support MIDI 2.0. And so you can gradually add MIDI 2.0 capabilities to your system once that API is there. So your existing MIDI 1.0 devices will continue to work in a MIDI 2.0 environment in the future. The first thing we need to do is get that foundation of an API in the OS. And then applications can run MIDI 1.0 or run MIDI 2.0, and the OS will make the connections between those and do translations, I hope. That's the plan of OS companies anyway. They're to make these things seamless. So you'll be able to use MIDI 1.0 and MIDI 2.0 together and slowly add MIDI 2.0 as each application comes along. People like Steinberg announced or showed at the ADC, Audio Developers Conference in London in November. They showed how in Cubase they had a shim running for VST3 plugins that made them basically into MIDI 2.0 plugins by taking MIDI 2.0 data and converting to their note expressions and so on. So I think there'll be this transition, and it should be fairly comfortable to just start adding MIDI 2.0. And some of it, if you have only one MIDI 2.0 device, then it's going to talk to MIDI 1.0, and your other devices are not going to do MIDI 2.0, but MIDI 1.0 will work. And as you add MIDI 2.0, these devices will discover each other that they're all doing MIDI 2.0, and your system will just migrate to MIDI 2.0.
That's great. That sounds really wonderful, and it's good that it's not going to be affecting the sound designers and composers on a day-to-day basis. So we have another question, and that is, has there been any work or research done in regards to audio games or audio accessibility in video games for visually impaired players?
Yes, absolutely. And there are, in fact, some websites, and I know that I saw that Brian Schmidt was in the chat for a minute there, and for a minute, I think he had a site that was specifically set up for audio-only games. So there have been sites out there, and there are sites out there, and there are games that are available, research also, I'm sure that's available about that. So I'm not 100% specific on the details. Maybe someone can hit the chat with some links about where the best places to go for that are these days. But I know that the work is out there.
Great. And we have another question. What are the resources for sound designers looking to become educators? I am trained through university for sound design, audio engineering, but do you help connect individuals like myself to become educators?
Yeah, so sorry to hog the answers on this, but so that's one of the things that got me initially started, was my interest in game audio education. And in terms of doing that, we've spent a lot of time, Scott Looney and I have a company called the Game Audio Institute that we're essentially integrating through San Francisco State University now. So we actually will start on June 1st, and we have a month-long summer intensive that is specifically to bring and train people up, teachers as well as students, and bring them up to speed on what they need to know so that they can bring these things into the classroom. So there are resources out there. So I would encourage you to go to the GameAudioInstitute.com and to check out the information there. And also become part of the education working group for the SIG, because that's where a lot of educators are, and that's where it's a meeting point for educators to get together and to work together.
Great.
I hope that answered part of the question. It's a complex question, actually.
Definitely. So it looks like we have one last question. Does MIDI 2.0 have suggestions for game engines like Unity or Unreal for integration into their engine? Possibly creating a standardized path for using music to trigger game events rather than music reacting to games? And would this be done through middleware?
I would certainly hope that that kind of thing ends up done through middleware. Yes, the common middleware engines all have MIDI support and have had MIDI support for many, many years. And I would love to see those middleware engines adopt the universal MIDI packet. That's really the fundamental thing that they need to do in order to enable all of MIDI 2.0. There's a bunch of MIDI 2.0 things that can work. Profiles and property exchange, those JSON exchanges and profiles work on existing systems. They run standard system exclusive messages, so they can run on existing APIs, existing DAWs, existing middleware. So there's a bunch of MIDI 2.0 that middleware can do right now. But for the full enabled experience, look forward to have middleware companies adopt the universal MIDI packet, and then consider routing of groups and so on. We, as a MIDI Manufacturers Association, we'd love to see some leaders in the industry make some recommendations about how MIDI 2.0 might be tied to game controllers, for example, or the IASIG made recommendations years ago for 3D control over MIDI. Those kinds of things are all things that the MMA has interest in developing. MIDI 2.0 is really at a starting point. It's usable now, but or we can develop products on it right now, but there's still a lot of things that we need to add in terms of these more directed applications. And so I'd love to speak with people in the industry and exchange ideas and get to work on standardizing those efforts.
So there's one more question about MIDI 2.0, and that's, are there any performance concerns with large amounts of MIDI 2.0 gear? Even currently with MPE, some of my peers and I have found concerns regarding recording data in which there were large bottlenecks of just the massive amounts of data trying to be recorded in real time.
Right. So MIDI 1.0 runs at what we would now consider a relatively slow speed. And unfortunately, even on systems where you can run high speed, for example, you can run MIDI between applications in an OS at an incredible rate and not have bottlenecks. But sometimes in some systems, you don't know where the data is going. It might be going to a 5-pin DIN cable over a slow connection. And so a lot of programs actually throttle data or create bottlenecks because they're assuming there might be a slow connection. In the MIDI 2.0 world, we have some new capabilities. In the USB MIDI driver, for example, bandwidth is declared by a device, so you know how fast you can send data. And we have, for other transports, we have the ability to declare bandwidth. And so we will see that bandwidth open up, and it should even open up for MIDI 1.0 traffic in the future with some of the new things we've done with MIDI 2.0. So yeah, we recognize those bottlenecks, and we will get rid of them over the next 1 and 2, maybe 3 years before they're all gone.
Sure. I want to thank everybody, certainly everybody who presented today, and most of all, everybody who showed up in the chat room and on the Twitch channel here. We're really grateful to be working with the IGDA. And we strongly encourage everybody to join each of these organizations we've talked about, because they do help make the industry go around. And change isn't usually possible without the work of people like the ones who work in the IASIG and other organizations to make things like MIDI 2.0 come out. We're really grateful to everybody who's worked on projects, who is interested in working on projects. And what can I say? Visit us, let us know your thoughts. If you've got ideas, want to start a working group, let's do it.